When the ruling came down, the HOA's empire collapsed faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, the county froze all Maple Ridge accounts and ordered an emergency review of every project Charles Bennett had ever approved. Local news ran the headline for days: HOA built on stolen land. The board resigned one by one, each statement more desperate than the last. Charles, the once untouchable president, tried to spin it as a paperwork mistake, but no one believed him anymore. The residents who had bought those 96 homes were furious. Some demanded refunds, others filed lawsuits of their own. The construction companies pulled out, investors vanished, and the once pristine neighborhood turned eerily silent. I drove by the development one morning just a few weeks after the verdict. Where there had once been rows of shining new homes, there were now half-finished shells, windows boarded up, and signs that read, "Property seized, pending demolition." It should have felt triumphant. But standing there, watching all that wreckage, I felt something different. Not joy, not anger, just closure. The land was mine again. The same soil my father used to walk on every morning, coffee in hand. The same fields where we planted corn and chased the sunset. It was scarred now, torn up by greed and arrogance, but it was still ours. Rebecca helped me file the restoration order. The court required the HOA to pay for the cleanup and rebuild the land to its original condition. It took months, heavy machinery, soil repair, tree planting, but slowly, the land started to heal. Sometimes I'd drive out at dusk and just sit there watching the wind move through the grass that had grown back. The silence that used to feel painful now felt earned. Charles Bennett didn't disappear quietly. A few months later, the county prosecutor announced a full investigation into his activities. Turns out my case wasn't the only one. He'd pulled similar stunts in other developments, smaller scale, quieter victims. But this time there was no hiding. The court ordered him to pay millions in damages, and when he tried to declare bankruptcy, investigators found hidden accounts linked to shell companies. The man who once lectured me about the greater good ended up losing everything: his reputation, his career, and his freedom. The day I read that he'd been sentenced for fraud and forgery, I didn't celebrate. I just folded the newspaper and set it aside. Justice had already been done. But the real story didn't end in court. It ended in how the town changed afterward. For years, Maple Ridge had been this picture-perfect community, polished on the outside but rotten underneath. After my case, people started asking questions. Homeowners began reading their HOA contracts, attending board meetings, demanding transparency. What used to be blind obedience turned into awareness. Neighbors who once ignored me now stopped by to talk, sometimes to apologize. One older couple told me, "We thought you were just bitter. We didn't realize what they were doing." I smiled. "You weren't supposed to." Because that's how HOAs like Charles's operated, behind a curtain of fake order and community standards. It wasn't about lawns or fences. It was about control. And once people stop questioning authority, it grows unchecked. But not anymore. Not here. One evening, Rebecca stopped by with a bottle of wine and that calm, knowing smile of hers. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" she said. "Winning something this big." "Strange," I admitted, "but right." We sat outside as the sun went down, looking over the empty field. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home again. She asked what I'd do next. "Rebuild," I said. "Not houses, just what was here before. A workshop, maybe a small garden, something honest." She nodded. "You know, this case is going to be taught in law classes for years." I laughed softly. "Good. Maybe someone will think twice before pulling a stunt like that again." Months turned into a year. The land bloomed again. Grass covered the scars where foundations used to be. Birds returned. The workshop was rebuilt, this time stronger, cleaner, simpler. One morning I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in neat handwriting. Inside was a letter. "Mr. Parker, I was one of the contractors who worked on Maple Ridge. I didn't know the truth until it was too late. I just wanted to say thank you for standing up. People like you remind the rest of us that some things still matter. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud. Life settled into something peaceful again. Every once in a while, I'd see new families driving by, curious about the land that made the news. I never told them the full story. Just that it used to belong to someone who believed in doing the right thing, no matter how long it took. Sometimes they'd nod politely. Sometimes they'd smile. But every time I looked out at that horizon, open, quiet, free, I remembered exactly why I'd done it. It was never about money or revenge. It was about dignity, about standing up to people who thought they could rewrite reality just because they had power. And maybe, in some small way, it was about keeping my father's promise, that this land would always be ours. Not because of a fence or a deed, but because of what it stood for: freedom, integrity, home. A year later, the county offered to buy part of the restored property for a public park. I said yes, but only on one condition: it would bear my father's name. Parker Field, dedicated to honest hands. When the sign went up, I stood there for a long time, just watching families stroll by, kids running through the grass that had once been stolen. Somewhere deep down, I imagined my father standing there beside me, smiling the way he used to. The fight was over. The land was safe, and peace, real peace, and had finally come home. Before I left that day, I looked one last time across the open field, the sun dipping low in the sky, and whispered, "You can build fences. You can fake documents. You can even pour concrete over the truth. But eventually the ground remembers who it belongs to. And that's how it ends. A quiet man, a piece of land, and a battle no one thought could be won. But sometimes doing nothing, letting the world see the injustice, is the loudest statement you can ever make. Because in the end, truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand.